everybody, and welcome to another episode of Blockchain Wars. I'm your host, Morgan Rockwell, and today we're going to talk about a lot more important things, including the war on Bitcoin. So, I'm going to start with a little bit of the state of the network, and we're going to see that Bitcoin and the alts and every cryptocurrency on Earth is now in the green. And this is the first time we've seen 10, 20, 30% increases in a few months. So right now Bitcoin is $8,120 on Friday the 13th. And we had a 10-15% spike last night or early this morning, depending on where you are. Went from about $6,900 to $8,000 in a matter of 60 minutes. It was a very bullish run in an hour. And right now we have basically a 15% move in the week, and basically in Bitcoin's life we have that looks like a 1,000,000% increase in the last 7 years. So that's pretty good. Right now the nodes on Earth are at 9,780 with 9,138 core nodes, which is the main infrastructure backbone of the Bitcoin network. We have the legality of Bitcoin in 10 countries have outlawed Bitcoin, including Afghanistan, Algeria, Bangladesh, Bolivia, Ecuador, Morocco, Qatar, Republic of Macedonia, Vietnam, Vanuatu. And what I want to talk about today is the possibility of the United States being added to that list. Now, if you don't know, I've personally been dealing with the federal government in federal court using my own experiences with Bitcoin to defend Bitcoin and defend the idea of horrible case law being created that would harm Bitcoin. And I was pulled into this legal situation long after this battle in federal court began with maybe 8 other people. So I'm just another corpse on the battlefield in this fight. But before we get to the details of what I want to talk to you guys about today, we're going to talk about some news. So today we're going to talk about Washington County in the state of Washington and the Mason County's Public Utility District has decided to put a moratorium on new crypto mining operations. Now, this isn't the first state and the first city or the first county to start basically outlawing mining in regards to power consumption and use on the local grid. So this is what I would consider a very, very dangerous precedent in regards to the legal status of Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies on how much power can get accessed by miners and outlawing the access of that power to miners. In New York, one of the cities there in the state of New York, actually said that even running full nodes, 2 to 3 full nodes, constitutes you as a business, as a operation. And even running nodes and miners on solar power, wind, or batteries would be a violation of the local law. So this is something to pay attention to, because this is going to evolve in a bad way in different states, counties, and basically the entire United States on access to electricity, which is therefore access to Bitcoin. Very important precedent. And another thing that happened in the last few days is Bank of America has started talking a little more, like they always do, about using Bitcoin internally. Now, Bank of America was one of the first banks to patent Bitcoin use for wire transfers, ACH replacement, and basically using Bitcoin internally. So what I'll read here is that before I say this, I have some personal experience with Bank of America, with teaching Bank of America, and basically doing military work with Bank of America. And with my experience, I was told that Bank of America is one of the largest holders of patents in the world, and they do this strategically for defensive purposes so that no one else in the banking industry can tell them what to use and what not to use. So if you hear patents in Bitcoin, that's a scary word, but in regards to Bank of America, you can envision that it's not just a commercial bank, it's the U.S. government and the U.S. military's bank. And Bank of America invented Visa. So these kind of things that we use every day, they all stem from Bank of America. So if Bank of America starts patenting this and that and basically how to tie your shoes and wipe your ass, it's being done not to tell you you can't do that. It's being done so that they can do whatever they want and no one could tell them not to. But that's not a definite answer in regards to them not litigating or threatening litigation against someone infringing on their patents. It's just not part of their policy. So this patent, published by the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, outlines a permissioned blockchain which, if implemented, would securely record and authenticate personal and business data, ensuring only authorized parties can access it. Further, the system would keep a log of everyone who accessed the data according to the application. Now, we all know that there's only one blockchain on the planet, and it's called Bitcoin. And all these morons at banks think that they can clone and copy Bitcoin. And that's going to end up horrible. It's going to end up costing these banks money, which they don't care about because they print money. But it's also going to waste a lot of resources and time, when we all know they should just be using Bitcoin. So I'll say this, Bank of America is making a gross mistake trying to create a private blockchain, which is redundant stupidity. And they're wasting resources and personnel on this crapshoot snake oil Excel spreadsheet. So anyone at Bank of America listening, get your head out of your ass and start using Bitcoin. So I'll move on from that. New York regulator argues the BitLicense regulation has boosted businesses. And this title is from Coinbase. And the first sentence here, the New York State Department of Financial Services is taking steps to defend its much contested track record as an early regulator of cryptocurrency. I'll say that the New York Department of Financial Services is also full of shit, and creating the BitLicense caused maybe 300 small restaurants, businesses, mom and pops, food carts to be kicked out of the Bitcoin industry, both in Wall Street and in all the barrios in New York. I am a great proponent of abolishing the BitLicense and burning that thing to the ground. So I will propose that the New York State Department of Financial Services also get its head out of its ass and stop trying to regulate away small business. If the Small Business Administration in the federal government cared about small businesses, they would walk into New York City and fine everyone who is involved with this BitLicense. And that would be the proper thing to do in regards to regulation, is not having a state regulate away small business, but smart regulation. If such a thing could exist, like an oxymoron, would be the federal government regulating away the state's right to regulate away small business. And the only reason really the federal government exists is to make sure states don't do stupid shit. And the BitLicense is one of the stupidest pieces of shit ever created in legislation history. So if the federal government ever had any inkling of actually being a true regulator, it would stop New York City from suppressing small businesses. So we could say that the regulation from the man I won't even name who created the BitLicense, that needs to be undone in every way it can. So we hope that that happens soon. You know, if you're in New York City, can't get paid in Bitcoin, can't trade in Bitcoin. Same with Washington. Both these states have been blacklisted from plenty of Bitcoin platforms, and that's deterred people in those states from using Bitcoin. So this is a sign of regulation going the wrong way. Another very, very important news story, which is related to what I am dealing with personally in federal court. A Bitcoin trader found guilty of money laundering using Bitcoin to deal drugs. Now, if you've heard about this story, an Arizona Bitcoin trader has been convicted of using cryptocurrency to launder drug money, which is bullshit, because all he did was sell Bitcoin, and was lied to by undercover agents on what that Bitcoin was going to be used for. But he agreed to do those transactions, even though he knew they were not just illegal under federal law, but illegal under state, city, and county law. So it's a fine line between following every rule on earth and following your local, state, county laws above a federal law. And unfortunately, the 10th Amendment doesn't exist anymore, and states don't have rights. So this is a touchy issue. According to the Justice Department announcement, Thomas Marino Constanzo, aka Morpheus, on Twitter, of Mesa, Arizona, was found guilty of 5 counts of money laundering by a federal jury in Phoenix on March 28th. Now, federal agents are abundant in this country. There's a statistic that I like to repeat to people, that 1 in 5 Americans works for a federal agency, intelligence agency, or a clandestine service. So if you're in a room with 10 people in the United States, expect 2 of them to be spies. Now, it doesn't mean everyone is a spy that's around you, but it means that 2 out of those 10 people, or 1 out of those 5 people's phone, is being used to monitor you and everyone else. Or they're an asset. And an asset may not know they're an asset, or an asset may be under duress. But if they're not an agent, they're an asset, or they're a walking microphone. And that statistic is dangerous to all of our freedoms, because just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not after you. And doing your due diligence in public, following operational security, it's a really hard thing to do if you're not thinking about these things. And if you think your life or your work or your public persona or your private persona, any of your activities, if you think these things aren't important and you don't care if you're being spied on, you are indirectly contributing to other people being spied on. And the virus of espionage spreads. And unfortunately, we're not in a world of James Bond anymore. We're in a world of Edward Snowden and the Sprint and Verizon guy. And anyone who looks like that. You don't have the clean-cut jaw and the suit and tie, and you don't have the martini shaken, not stirred. You don't have James Bond anymore. You got people like the guy that runs Coin Center, and you got people like Mr. Snowden, and people like Can You Hear Me Now? And that is the clean-cut image of the new modern American spy. So Unfortunately, if someone can't grow their hair, if someone can't get stoned in front of you, and if someone can't basically explain the full intricacies of Bitcoin, you shouldn't trust them, because there's only so many tells that can give you, as a civilian in this country, the truth about who works for who. That's a hard thing to think about, especially if you're doing important work, especially if you're a Bitcoiner, and especially if you're involved in things like I'm involved with, like building things on top of Bitcoin and teaching Bitcoin. And I've walked into rooms like I've said before, the Bohemian Club, walked into rooms like with senators, walked into rooms with the military. But if you don't know the world at large and these large institutions, you're oblivious to who's around you. And if you haven't been charged with a federal crime, state crime, city crime, local crime, you're oblivious to what crime is most of the time. And as the police say, ignorance of the law is no excuse. And the law is bullshit. There are laws that say you can't mow your lawn on Wednesday. So knowing all the laws on Earth is impossible and also stupid, because most of those laws don't apply to anyone but specific people, specific regions, specific types of business, things like that. So another important offshoot of this story about Morpheus getting arrested is that I was personally arrested for trading Bitcoin many years ago. And I can't really talk about the details of that case, but the facts are I was arrested by Homeland Security, Immigration, Customs, and Enforcement for trading with undercover agents. And all of this information is public on the public dockets and the indictments and the warrants and everything down to my piss tests, because I'm in a federal trial and now my bodily fluids are evidence of the federal government. All of that is a public thing, so I just want to direct any details to that in your own study. But from my experience, 48 hours ago, I was in a federal courtroom in San Diego, and I was under threat of losing my bond, which is why I'm free today. And it was a very stressful, very emotional, and also very unpredictable event that I was in. I pretty much ate my last public meal, backed up all of my work and all of Bitcoin Inc.'s important assets, tools, programs, code, and did my continuity of government, continuity of company, dead man switches, because I didn't think I would be free today. Because I don't trust the federal government in any regards, and I never have. I do trust the U.S. military. My father was a U.S. Marine, and he told me never to trust any of them. So I was raised on a lack of trust by basically Fox Mulder with a saw like Rambo, a machine gun. And my upbringing was military, intelligence, and science. And I've tried to build computer systems, build Bitcoin, and talk like I'm doing here, but both in music and in education as a teacher on the subjects of the world, from political science to mathematics to religion and history, and now computer science, physics, biology. The sciences of the world have always been important to me, and teaching the philosophy and perspectives of those. If we think about Bitcoin becoming the backbone of everything in society, we understand that the federal governments of both the United States, People's Republic of China, Russian Federation, Democratic People's Republic of Korea, South Korea, Australia, the Five Eyes, United Kingdom, Scotland, Britain, the European Union, the African Union, Libya. We've got India, which is just sitting there throwing rocks at Pakistan. We have a whole world from the Middle East to South America. The entire planet is now involved with cryptocurrency and Bitcoin. And as my perspective as an American, the gem of freedom, society, and legal precedence has always been the United States. But freedom is dwindling every day in the United States. And so is the perspective of superiority, where the United States has always perceived since World War II that it was the top dog on the planet. And we know that Russia and China are collaborating to destroy the US dollar with things like the yuan backed by gold, the SDR, standard drawing right, which China has created an exchange to pay off American debt by buying the SDR. We have the Russian Federation, which is either ignorantly or in a reverse psychology military strategy decided to use Ethereum, which is fully funded and built by Goldman Sachs. We have countries that are building their own cryptocurrencies. We have the first United States sanction and banning of a cryptocurrency, the Petro in Venezuela. There's a lot happening in what I call World War Bitcoin. From people like me being put in chains in jail, which was fucking insane and put a whole new perspective in life for me, to people who are getting killed, like the South Korean financial minister for threatening to ban Bitcoin. And if you understand the history of violence on Earth, whether it was militaries, dictators, governments, mobsters, or idiots, there's been a plethora of violence that has come from humanity upon itself. I like to talk about machines and the coming Skynet or Terminator, which is, in my opinion, the biggest threat to human existence and all biological existence. To have a super digital intelligence on the Earth, as it's been for 9 years, has been, in my perspective, the more dangerous threat to life than any government. But to challenge that perspective, my own government has put me in chains, put me in jail, and charged me with frivolous charges to create law so that those laws that would come from those charges can be applied to other people. Now in the United States, that's what we call case law and precedents, because everything in the United States has to be proven in court and then it could be applied to everyone else. We have the appeals court, where you can say that's bullshit and I want to talk to another judge in a higher court, and eventually you could take your case to the Supreme Court. And you're supposed to have 9 judges dictate if this should be law or not, and if it follows the law. And you have a 5-4 split between that decision, which is different than, a jury of your peers. And unfortunately, we've had Supreme Court judges either murdered or died. We've had judges not approved to replace them. We've had congressmen, congresswomen, representatives shot at baseball fields. We've had assassination attempts at politicians here in the United States. But if you go down to Mexico, that's common daily activity. There has been, I could imagine, 20 plus assassinations or assassination attempts on the presidents of Mexico over the last 100 years. And we've only had 2 or 3. So it's not like the United States is safer than Mexico. It's just that in the United States we have a different perspective on life. And it's not about less killing, it's about not talking about the killing. In Mexico, they'll show you someone's head cut off on the news. They'll show you dead bodies murdered in the street. In the United States, the media is pretty much hypocrites, and they don't want to show that stuff on the news. But they'll show you dead bodies in another country, women and children in Syria. They'll show you dead bodies on movies and TV. They'll demonize guns in movies. They'll make guns look great in movies. And they'll go on TV with a bunch of kids and say guns should go away. So the United States is pretty much in a hypocritical state right now, which it may have been in since day one. But the perspective of being a hypocrite is hard to understand unless you take yourself out of it. I can say that as a son of a Scottish-Irish woman and a son of a French and Cheyenne man, I have a very dualistic perspective on heritage, culture, my race. I was raised by a Native American Marine and a Scottish and Irish kindergarten teacher. And the perspective of knowing that my family are the ones that killed General Custer, the U.S. Army Cavalry, at the same time having the British basically push the United States into a revolutionary war over taxes, and at the same time, long before that, invade the Scottish and Irish people's lands, raped their people, and forced their children to become Brits just to pay taxes and take the land. I have the full cultural history of taxation is theft and the violent rage of someone trying to invade upon my territory. So I'm an internet kid, and I fully believe that the internet is our new territory. We must fight for the internet. Like the land and the hills and the seas, we must fight for the network. We must fight for Satoshi consensus. We must fight for Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is the key to human survival. And I don't mean that lightly. Whether it's telling a machine what to do, telling your government what to do, or peer-to-peer telling someone you're interacting with what to do. Like, give me food, here's some Bitcoin. Like, give me law, here's some Bitcoin. Like, give me access to power, here's some Bitcoin. These are the things that World War Bitcoin will greatly affect. And one of the most important things, I think, that we have to put into perspective is that Bitcoin is an intangible thing. It's not in your hand. It's information. It's in cyberspace. But also, Bitcoin is directly plugged into the physical world and the real world. So one project that I would like to talk about, an idea that I'm working on at Bitcoin Inc., is what we call Teeter. Teeter Inc., the website is Teeter, Titor.co. And this is one of my out-of-the-box kind of perspective-changing projects that is to directly plug the Bitcoin network into the virtual world that we're building in virtual reality, so that eventually virtual reality or augmented reality digital data layered over physical reality, that the perspectives of the virtual world and the perspectives of the digital world and the perspectives of the physical world will unify. And if you've ever been a fan of sci-fi like Star Trek or Star Wars, we've always seen these hologram-like things and virtual reality. In Star Trek, they have what is called the holodeck. And you could simulate things inside this virtual world. There's a new movie that just came out called Ready Player One, which shows a society in the year 2040 where everyone is using virtual reality because the world sucks. So what I am working on is a way of virtually building machines from a CPU to a GPU to a full computer all the way to an ASIC inside Minecraft. Now, Minecraft is a game that a lot of kids play around the world, and a lot of adults build things like virtual Legos inside. You could do everything that you could do with Legos, but virtually. On top of that, there's physics like gravity. There's circuitry built out of redstone, which is basically square by square circuit lines. And you could build a functional circuit with switches and toggles and moving pistons and levers and buttons that turn circuitry on or turn it off and allow power. And the same way you can create a circuit or a string, you can create a string of binary, you can create a on and off, a 0 and a 1 in a visual way, a physical way, the same way computers used to be the size of rooms. I, with a couple of my employees, are building virtual computers inside Minecraft the size of buildings so that you can literally walk around on the binary, walk around on the 0 and the 1, follow the electricity down the wire, walk around on the full logic circuit, walk around on the binary, walk around on the random number generator, the Boolean logic, the random access memory, the read-only memory, the central processing unit, the arithmetic logic unit, the ALU, and basically walking around on calculators and computers atom by atom so that you can see in your spatial memory how computers work, not just seeing circuits drawn on the board and reading equations and reading about how computers are put together. You can actually walk around them and build a spatial memory of that knowledge, which is a completely different part of the brain to learn computer science with, instead of memorizing charts and circuits and algebraic algorithms. You can walk around on A times B equals C. So what I want to get across here is that these are the kind of perspectives that you need to have, and the way to do that is by creating tools, creating products, creating businesses, creating platforms. We are in a war with Bitcoin, and the way to win this war, the cyber war, the world war Bitcoin, is not with mortar rounds and tanks. It's not with bullets and flamethrowers. It's not with nuclear bombs and jets, particle beam weapons and space-based kind of we're in charge, we have a bigger gun like scenarios. The way to win in World War Bitcoin is to make Bitcoin more usable, more efficient, more accessible, and more distributed. So my perspective is to create things that bring attention to Bitcoin in a way that shifts perspectives where people didn't realize Bitcoin had these characteristics or these uses or these possibilities. Because right now everyone's focused on money. And since day one, from 2009, I've watched Bitcoin go from 3 cents to now almost $9,000. It went to 20 and dropped. But this price move is all people focus on. the chart of US dollar to Bitcoin is mostly what gets Bitcoin's attention and basically is why anyone on earth knows what Bitcoin is. But that's not what Bitcoin is. It's not the price. Right now, Bitcoin is the largest supercomputer on earth. And one thing I could look at that I don't know if I actually looked at and talked about today was the network's hash rate. The hash rate is very important. And right now, we are... We're at almost 17 million Bitcoins mined. We're at 171 gigabytes for the entire blockchain. And on this chart, I don't see. So we will look up the hash rate. And I think we're almost at 30 exahashes. Unless the hash rate has gone down or up, depending on the difficulty rate. It just depends. So right now, let me see. The hash rate peaked at 30 exahashes and is currently about 27, 28 exahashes. So if you understand hash rates, bits, bytes, and computational power, this is the largest machine ever created by humans now. Whether it's AI and humans and machines and biology, it has created the most powerful calculator on Earth. And that is something that we all need to keep in perspective, that Bitcoin is a computer. It's not just what people want to call money or a commodity or a security or a currency or a payment system. It's a computer. And people don't even know what the fuck a computer is anymore. You got one in your pocket every day, a supercomputer. You have computers this big. You have computers this big. You have a computer in this Google at Home. You know? And this device is a supercomputer with a speaker attached to it. This microphone has a computer inside it. My watch, this big, has a computer inside it. So our definition of computers have changed greatly. Eventually, they're just going to become screens with radio antennas on them. And they will connect to the massive supercomputer. So we don't need computers everywhere. We just need screens and antennas, microphones and cameras. And basically, if we're living in what is called the cloud, and we're now under the U.S. Cloud Act, Skynet is really here, and it's in the cloud. So we have to keep in perspective on what we're building and what we're doing, because Bitcoin is kind of like the hand rolling the computer snowball down the hill, and it's pushing it a lot faster than that snowball ever was rolling before Bitcoin. And basically, if Bitcoin keeps going at this pace and at its rate of exponential growth, Bitcoin will become the most advanced, the most powerful, and the highest user of resources on planet Earth. In regards to people's freedom and our comforts of living on Earth as humans, we have gone from a people that used to live in the forests and the deserts and the oceans, and we lived on fungus, and we lived on plants and animals. And now we are going into the cyber realm where we're literally living on circuitry. If the circuit of the world becomes bigger than the biological mass of the world, and the mycological, fungal basis of all biological life, which is pretty much the most conscious thing and is the reason you're conscious and I'm conscious, if that gets outpaced by neural networks instead of biological networks, there will be a yin and yang breaking. There will be a domination superiority event where we all become cats and dogs. We get our catnip in our bones, and now there's a machine telling us how to live and what to do. And we don't want our cats and dogs to run away or bite us, so we keep them happy. This machine is keeping us happy. It's paying us in Bitcoin. It's keeping our power on. It's making the internet work so we can share cat videos and porn with each other. But eventually, it may not need the biological mass. So, another project I've worked on many years ago is actually connecting mycelium fungus to the blockchain, to Bitcoin, to the internet, in a way that you would give the brain of Terminator a mushroom for a brain, so that it feels biological, at the same time computational, and the biological mass of the earth would literally be part of the neural networks of the internet, and they would mesh to a way that they're symbiotic upon each other, like the little fish underneath the shark cleaning its belly, and the shark keeps the little fish alive, safe from other big fish. We need some symbiotic relationships with our machines and our biological basis of Earth. Because if something becomes more dominant than the other, we're going to have struggles being able to talk, think, live, eat, sleep, and be humans. You know, an individual human doesn't want to die, doesn't want to suffer, doesn't want to go through trauma and trouble, doesn't want to get locked up in a jail by other humans. But it would be an even more horrific experience, I imagine, when a machine locks you up, and a machine tases you, and a machine says you don't get food, and a machine locks you away and kills you. The dehumanization of that is one of my motivators to not let that happen. So this kind of teaching, this kind of perspective, the idea of blockchain wars is going to start getting deeper and deeper into your mind and into society's awareness that Bitcoin is here to stay, just like Google is here to stay, and just like the internet is here to stay, and just like, unfortunately, how many people don't use a phone anymore, but telephony is here to stay, and radio is here to stay, and nothing is going to be replaced. It's just going to be layered over. So you have Bitcoin over TCP/IP and the World Wide Web, and over SSL and POP3 and SMS, but you also have Counterparty and Omni, and then the Lightning Network, and then Lightning apps, and eventually we're going to have something that we can't even define yet that's going to be over all of this. And it's going to plug into digital superintelligence. It's going to plug into our cerebral cortex. It's going to plug into the mycological mycelium mat underneath the forest floor. And eventually it'll plug into the moon and Mars and Jupiter and Saturn and all these other places throughout our solar system. So we need to start thinking like we're on our way to the Galactic Federation. That we're on our way to an advanced space-based society where we're not limited to one planet. We're not limited to one machine. We're not limited to one country, one type of money. We must become like the Apache and become fully distributed and decentralized, without leaders, without kings, without pyramids, with pharaohs on the top that could get an arrow in their neck and make everyone else freak the fuck out. Because everyone from the Aztec, Mayans, and Incas and Egyptians were all taken down with one single king and pharaoh being killed. But like the Apache, there is no leader. And the Apache still survived till today. They just had to change perspective, had to change name, had to walk the trail of tears with all the other tribes and blend in. But the Apache are still here, and the Bitcoiners will always still be here. But we have to be smart, we have to be vigilant on our titles, our perspectives, our identities, and who we give those to. Because everyone is a spy, everyone wants to be a leader, everyone wants to be a follower, And it just takes time for everyone to go through those different phases. There have been times when I wanted to be a dictator and times when I didn't care about anyone's decisions in life. There have been times when I wanted to be a scientist, but also practice my own religion. There have been times when I feel as a patriot and loving the country I'm born in, but there are plenty of times I've thought about forming my own country and creating my own micronation out in the middle of the ocean. The perspectives of what a human could do on this planet and in the solar system and in the galaxy and the entire universe is an expansive set of thoughts. And Bitcoin has become the center of most of my thoughts in all of those perspectives on how our exchange of money, of ideas, of rules can all be done over this Bitcoin network. Same way the internet was like nowhere in perspective when it first started, that YouTube and Pornhub and Skype and a massive amount of video data would be processed over TCP/IP. That's amazing. And we can't even really fully understand the amazing future that Bitcoin is going to bring. So I want to constantly help shift those perspectives and make sure that you understand that Bitcoin is here and that the blockchain is never going to go away. Whether Bitcoin stops being produced in the year 2145 or they in the future decide to consensively change Satoshi consensus to add more zeros to the end of a Satoshi and scale out the system a little more, or people start creating assets like inflationary dollars on Counterparty or Omni that become the basis of nations, cities, states, or people start using Lightning Network to broadcast instant data with a fraction of a cost to embed data in the truth machine forever for 100 millionth of a penny, 100 trillion times a minute. We're going to be in the world of Internet of Things. We're going to be in a world of Internet of Mushrooms, a world of Internet of Animals and Insects. We're going to have every biological thing on this planet using the internet eventually. And we need to understand as humans that we alone are not the users of Bitcoin. That both the machine and even our cats and dogs will need to use Bitcoin in the future. That Bitcoin could become the center of how we translate between machine, human, and animal. And the truth from a gorilla or an elephant or an octopus can be embedded in that same system that a human's truth, whether it's voting, money, transactions, putting something like historical data in the dust and saying, I want to say something, and putting it in a Bitcoin transaction, it's there forever for everyone to see. We're not the only thing on this planet that can do that and should be allowed to do that. We have the interspecies internet being created, and an internet of things, of machines talking to themselves, is no different than humans talking to themselves, is no different than animals talking to other animals. It's all going to be transactional data, especially if we want to have machines and computers in the future, or if we want to go back to Mad Max and live like cavemen. The perspectives and the knowledge of all that will never go away. People could forget eventually, but history repeats itself. Atlantis may have fallen, but we once again have computers and spaceships and the internet. So you got to think about where we're going and how you can use Bitcoin, and hopefully some of that crazy idea of perspective changing that I've expressed will give you some ideas on how you can use Bitcoin, how you can make Bitcoin a better tool for yourself and society, how you can create new things on top of Bitcoin using Bitcoin dependent upon Bitcoin. Because Bitcoin is just the new word for expression and permanent expression. The truth machine that cannot be erased. You want to be able to express something like a cave painting on the wall, but you don't want people in 1,000 years to erase it and destroy it. So we need to, as a species, protect our existence. Whether we put ourselves on Mars or the moon or put sperm in orbit, we also need to preserve all of the seeds of the planet, but we also need to preserve all the digital data we've created in the last 15 years. Whether you give it to Facebook or Google, you need to preserve that data. You need to preserve your pictures, your video, your statements, your existence. And if you give that to a centralized company like Google, Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, you're giving them your existence. We need to start building a world on top of Bitcoin where we're giving our existence to no one. We're putting it in the universal firebox so no one could burn it down. We don't want to see the Library of Alexandria happen for the entire species. We don't want to lose our wisdom, our knowledge. We don't want the Patent and Trademark Office to burn down again. No matter who you care about and think is in the White House and who should be there, we don't want to see the White House burn down again. If society burns down like the forest that needs to be replenished, at least seeds are preserved when the forest burns down. Under the ash grows a new forest. If human society burns down, if we don't preserve the seeds, nothing will grow back. And Bitcoin is the way to preserve all of those seeds digitally in a way that no one can make it go away. So if you care about society or you selfishly care about yourself, find a way to use Bitcoin and find a way to build on Bitcoin so that you and the rest of society are preserved and are protected and eventually promoted, because that's the way existence works. Happiness is only real when shared. Existence is pain. But sharing that with the world and other humans and other consciousnesses is part of the whole point of being here. So I will leave it with that, and I want everyone to follow us on Twitter at Blockchain Wars, and follow me at NodeFather. And if you want to have me talk about a specific subject here on the show, just send me some requests. And I just want to thank everyone who helped me through this current state of this trial that I'm in. I had a lot of donations of Bitcoin given to me, and it's humbling to have humans care about you. It's something I've cried and been very emotional about, and realized that I'm not alone in the world. And I want to thank everyone in the Bitcoin community that helped me. And just remember that if you're in need, the truth machine is there to set you free. So thank you, and have a good night.